Hello, and welcome to this session of Scrum Master Certification course. This chapter includes the processes related to initiation of a project, create project vision, identify Scrum Master and stakeholders, form Scrum team, develop epics, create prioritized product backlog, and conduct release planning. Initiate phase, as defined in a guide to the Scrum body of knowledge, is applicable to portfolios, programs, and/or projects in any industry. Products, service, or any other results to be delivered to stakeholders. Projects of any size or complexity. Let's briefly understand each process that is a part of the initiate phase. The first process in this phase is the create project vision. In this process, the project business case is reviewed to create a project vision statement that will serve as the inspiration and provide focus for the entire project. The product owner is identified in this process. The second process is the identify Scrum Master and stakeholders. In this process, the Scrum Master and stakeholders are identified using specific selection criteria. The third process is form Scrum team. In this process, Scrum team members are identified. Normally, the product owner has the primary responsibility of selecting team members, but often does so in collaboration with the Scrum Master. The fourth process is the develop epics process. In this process, the project vision statement serves as the basis for developing epics. User group meetings may be held to discuss appropriate epics. The fifth process is the create prioritize product backlog process. In this process, epics are refined, elaborated, and then prioritized to create a prioritized product backlog for the project. The done criteria is also established at this point. The sixth and last process in this phase is the conduct release planning process. In this process, the Scrum core team reviews the user stories in the prioritized product backlog to develop a release planning schedule, which is essentially a phased deployment schedule that can be shared with the project stakeholders. The length of sprints is also determined in this process. We're going to learn about the create project vision process. The input to this process is project business case. A project business case may be a well-structured document or simply a verbal statement that expresses the rationale for initiating a project. It may be formal and comprehensive, or informal and brief. Regardless of format, it often includes substantial information on the background of the project, the intended business purpose and desired outcomes, a SWOT and gap analysis report, a list of identified risks, and estimations of time, effort, and cost. The project commences with the presentation of the project business case. A business case is presented to the stakeholders and sponsors. The stakeholders understand the expected business benefits of the project, and the sponsors confirm that they will provide the financial resources for the project. The tool used during this process is Project Vision Meeting. A Project Vision Meeting is a meeting with the program stakeholders, program product owner, program Scrum Master, and Chief Product Owner. It helps identify the business context, business requirements, and stakeholder expectations in order to develop an effective project vision statement. Scrum believes in closely engaging and collaborating with all business representatives to get their buy-in for the project and deliver greater value. The outputs of this process are identified product owner and project vision statement. Identified product owner. One of the outputs of this process is the identification of the product owner. The product owner is the person responsible for achieving maximum business value for the project. He or she is also responsible for articulating customer requirements and maintaining business justification for the project. The product owner represents the voice of the customer. Each Scrum team will have a designated product owner. A small project may only have one product owner, whereas larger projects may have several. These product owners are responsible for managing their sections of the prioritized product backlog. Product owners write the user stories and manage and groom the prioritized product backlog. The product owner role is described in more detail in section 3.4. Project Vision Statement. The key output of the Create Project Vision process is a well-structured project vision statement. A good project vision explains the business need the project is intended to meet rather than how it will meet the need. The project vision statement should not be too specific and should have room for flexibility. It is possible that the current understanding of the project may be based on assumptions that will change as the project progresses. So it's important that the project vision is flexible enough to accommodate these changes. The project vision should focus on the problem rather than the solution. We're going to learn about the Identify Scrum Master and Stakeholders process. The inputs to this process are Product Owner and Project Vision Statement. The Product Owner and Project Vision Statement is described in Module 2 that deals with the Create Project Vision process. The tool used in this process is the selection criteria. Selection criteria. Selecting appropriate Scrum Master and identifying relevant stakeholders is crucial to the success of any project. In some projects, there may have been preconditions stipulating certain team members and their roles. When there is flexibility in choosing Scrum Masters, the important selection criteria are problem-solving skills. This is one of the primary criteria to be considered while selecting Scrum Masters. The Scrum Master should have the necessary skills and experience to help remove any impediments for the Scrum team. Availability. The Scrum Master should be available to schedule, oversee, and facilitate various meetings, including the release planning meeting, daily stand-up meeting, and other sprint-related meetings. Commitment. The Scrum Master should be highly committed to ensure that the Scrum team is provided with a conducive work environment to ensure successful delivery of Scrum projects. And finally, servant leadership style. For more details, please refer to section 3.10.4.1. The outputs of this process are Identified Scrum Master and Identified Stakeholders. Identified Scrum Master. A Scrum Master is a facilitator and servant leader who ensures that the Scrum team is provided with an environment conducive to completing the project successfully. The Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and teaches Scrum practices to everyone involved in the project, clears impediments for the team, and ensures that the Scrum processes are being followed. It is a responsibility of the product owner to identify the Scrum Master for a Scrum project. The Scrum Master role is described in more detail in section 3.4. Identified stakeholders. Stakeholders is a collective term that includes customers, users, and sponsors, frequently interface with the Scrum core team and influence the project throughout the product development process. It is for the stakeholders that the project produces the collaborative benefits. We're going to learn about the Form Scrum Team process. The inputs to this process are Product Owner, Scrum Master, and Project Vision Statement. The tools used in this process are Scrum Team Selection. The Scrum Team is the core of any Scrum project, and getting the right team members is important for successful delivery of Scrum projects. Scrum team members are generalists and specialists in that they have knowledge of various fields and are experts in at least one. Beyond their subject matter expertise, it is the soft skills of team members that determine the success of self-organizing teams. Ideal members of the Scrum team are independent, self-motivated, customer-focused, responsible, and collaborative. The team should be able to foster an environment of independent thinking and group decision-making in order to extract the most benefits from the structure. The outputs of this process is the Identified Scrum Team. The Scrum Team, sometimes referred to as the development team, is a group or team of people who are responsible for understanding the business requirements specified by the product owner, estimating user stories, and final creation of the project deliverables. We're going to learn about the Develop Epics process. The inputs to this process are Scrum Core Team. The Scrum Core Team consists of the Scrum Team, the Scrum Master, and the Product Owner as described in section 3.3.1. Project Vision Statement. The Project Vision Statement is described in detail in section 8.1.3.2. The tool used in the Develop Epics process is user group meetings. User group meetings involve relevant stakeholders who are primarily users or customers of the product. They provide the Scrum Core team with first-hand information about user expectations. This helps in formulating the acceptance criteria for the product and provides valuable insights for developing epics. These meetings also promote buy-in for the project and create a common understanding among the Scrum Core team and relevant stakeholders. The outputs of the Develop Epics process are epics and personas. Epics. Epics are written in the initial stages of the project when most user stories are high-level functionalities or product descriptions and requirements are broadly defined. They are large, unrefined user stories in the prioritized product backlog. Once these epics come up in the prioritized product backlog for completion in an upcoming sprint, they are then broken down in smaller, more granular user stories. These smaller user stories are generally simple, short, and easy to implement functionalities or blocks of tasks to be completed in a sprint. Personas. Personas are highly detailed fictional characters, representative of the majority of users, and of other stakeholders who may not directly use the end product. Personas are created to identify the needs of the target user base. Creating specific personas can help the team better understand users and their requirements and goals. Based on a persona, the product owner can more effectively prioritize features to create the prioritized product backlog. Creating a persona involves assigning a fictional name and preferably a picture, like a stock image, to the character. The personas will include highly specific attributes such as age, gender, education, environment, interests, and goals. We're going to learn about the Create Prioritize Product Backlog process. The inputs to the Create Prioritize Product Backlog process are Scrum Core Team, epics, and personas. The Scrum Core Team is described in section 8.4.1.1. Epics are described in section 8.4.3.1. And personas are described in section 8.4.3.2. The tool used in this process is User Story Prioritization Method. User Story Prioritization Methods. Some techniques used to prioritize the user stories or requirements in the prioritized product backlog on the basis of business value are Moscow Prioritization Scheme. The Moscow Prioritization Scheme derives its name from the first letters of the phrase must have, should have, could have, and won't have. This prioritization method is generally more effective than simple schemes. The labels are in decreasing order of priority, with must-have user stories being those without which the product will have no value, and won't-have user stories being those that, although they would be nice to have, are not necessary to be included. Paired comparison. In this technique, a list of all the user stories in the prioritized product backlog is prepared. Next, each user story is taken individually and compared with the other user stories in the list, one at a time. Each time two user stories are compared, a decision is made regarding which of the two is more important. Through this process, a prioritized list of user stories can be generated. 100-point method. The 100-point method was developed by Dean Leffingwell and Don Widrig in 2003. It involves giving the customer 100 points that they can use to vote for the user stories that are most important. On completion of the voting process, prioritization is determined by calculating the total points allocated to each user story. The first output of this process is the prioritized product backlog. Prioritized product backlog. The product owner develops a prioritized product backlog which contains a prioritized list of business and project requirements written in the form of epics, which are high-level user stories. The prioritized product backlog is based on three primary factors: value, risk or uncertainty, and dependencies. It is also referred to as the risk-adjusted product backlog, since it includes identified and assessed risks related to the project. Let's examine each of the factors and understand how they affect the prioritized product backlog. Value. It is the product owner's responsibility to ensure delivery of those products that provide the highest level of business value. Risk and uncertainty. The more uncertainty that exists, the riskier the project is. Therefore, it is important that riskier products in the prioritized product backlog are given higher priority. Products carrying a higher level of risk will also require risk mitigation actions. When these risk mitigation actions are prioritized against the backlog, the result is a risk-adjusted product backlog. Dependencies. It is usually not possible to create a prioritized product backlog in which there are no dependencies between user stories. Functional requirements often depend on other functional and even non-functional requirements. Two of the most common ways to resolve dependencies are to either split a single story into multiple parts or combine independent stories. The second output of this process is the done criteria. Done criteria. Done criteria are a set of rules that are applicable to all user stories. A clear definition of done is critical because it removes the ambiguity from requirements and helps the team adhere to mandatory quality norms. This clear definition is used to create the done criteria that are an output of the create prioritized product backlog process. A user story is considered done when it is demonstrated to and approved by the product owner who judges it on the basis of the done criteria and the user story acceptance criteria. We're going to learn about the conduct release planning process. The inputs to this process are Scrum Core Team as described in section 8.4.1.1, Stakeholders as described in section 8.2.3.2, Project Vision Statement described in section 8.1.3.2, Prioritize Product Backlog as described in section 8.5.3.1, Done Criteria as described in section 8.5.3.2. The first tool used in this process is Release Planning Session. Release Planning Session. Release planning sessions are conducted to develop a release plan. The plan defines when various sets of usable functionality or products will be delivered to the customer. In Scrum, the major objective of a release planning meeting is to enable the Scrum team to have an overview of the release and delivery schedule for the product they are developing so that they can align with the expectations of the product owner and relevant stakeholders, primarily the project sponsor. Since Scrum Framework promotes information-based iterative decision-making over the detailed upfront planning practice in traditional waterfall-style project management, release planning sessions need not produce a detailed release plan for the entire project. The release plan can be updated continually as relevant information is available. The second tool used in this process is Release Prioritization Methods. Release prioritization methods are used to develop a release plan. These methods are industry and organization specific and are usually determined by the organization's senior management. One output of the conduct release planning process is the release planning schedule. A release planning schedule is one of the key outputs of this process. A release planning schedule states which deliverables are to be released to the customers, along with planned intervals and dates for releases. There may not be a release scheduled at the end of every sprint iteration. At times, a release may be planned after a group of sprint iterations are completed. Another output of this process is the length of sprint. Based on the various inputs including business requirements and release planning schedule, the product owner and the Scrum team decide on the length of sprint for the project. Once determined, the length of sprint often remains the same throughout the project. A sprint could be time-boxed from 1 to 6 weeks. However, to get a maximum benefit from a Scrum project, it is always recommended to keep the sprint time-boxed to 4 weeks. On projects with very stable requirements, sprints can be extended up to 6 weeks. Thank you for watching this video of Scrum Master Certification course.